What's up, guys? Welcome to Minds Behind the Music. I am your host, LA. Here with me is my buddy Mike. Shout out.
Howdy, guys. How's it going?
This is buddy Mike from. We met, I believe, in community college, and
Yep.
I would definitely like it if you guys checked out his channels. He has two channels. One called Mike Guitar Player 07, right? 07.
07, yes.
And RetroSpinVinyl.
hmm And the my guitar player 07 is kind of like more my music and my covers that I do. And the retro spin vinyl focuses on vinyl records. And what I'm currently spinning, I don't know, LA, when you're posting this podcast, but we are recording this in December. So I'm doing the 25 vinyl days of Christmas on my retro spin vinyl Instagram. So that's been fun.
Yep, definitely check that out. I'll link both of his channels and his Instagram in the description so you guys can check it out for yourselves.
Yes, because I do both Instagram and YouTube. So
hmm As do I. But let's get into the topic today. So what Mike and I have got for you guys today are a collection of vinyl records, specifically in the genre known as progressive rock, which a lot of you know as a very like complex and sophisticated genre of rock music that was very popular in the late 60s into the 70s and even some into the early 80s, I could say.
oh yeah.
But we're going to show you a couple of records that we got, and we'll talk about them, and we'll talk about just like how they sound on vinyl and just the quality of the record overall. If you
Okay,
could,
perfect.
if you want to start for us, Mike, you definitely can.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to choose one that a lot of people say is prog rock, and they definitely have elements of prog rock. I wouldn't consider them a full-on prog rock. A lot more people would call them classic rock. However, they definitely fit the bill for prog rock, especially the earlier stuff, and specifically this album that I'm about to showcase. The band would be Pink Floyd, and this is their album Metal.
Mm.
And fun fact about this album is that this album cover is an ear, an inside of an ear,
Oh
which
wow,
I,
I didn't know that.
which I don't
Actually,
know. Yeah, that's a cool fun fact. And this is in the gatefold here. We got a shot of the four band members of Pink Floyd. Most people know Pink Floyd for their Dark Side of the Moon album, if you're a music novice, or maybe even The Wall or Wish You Were Here. But before all that more mainstream success that Pink Floyd had, metal came onto the scene. Actually, this is the album, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that came right before Dark Side. And
yeah, it might have been.
this album is just fantastic all around. And what's great about this album is that it has some well-known Floyd songs, such as One of These Days, Fearless, but then one of Pink Floyd's most popular epics, so to speak, because people talk about the band, like say the Doors with their epics with like Riders on the Storm and the End. But they have a song on here called Echoes, and that's kind of what makes this album more specifically like more of a prog kind of thing, because the entire song is 20 minutes long approximately, and that's the entire B-side of this record. If that doesn't scream prog rock, I don't know what does. And pretty much it's a very cool listen. It's definitely trippy at times. There's a whole more quiet section that's very dreamy, I guess, is a way that it could be described. And you can just hear from the very beginning, there's like these sonic noises that you would kind of associate with maybe something like a alarm, maybe like, but like a mellower alarm. It's not like, but like
Yeah,
something that like you need to be aware of something going on, but it's not a major problem kind of thing. But
that's
yeah,
so.
and this
Oh, no,
album
no, go ahead.
and this album sounds very good. It's very well recorded. And if I'm not mistaken, this is on the original label that Pink Floyd was on. Yes, the Harvest label,
Harvest.
which was, I believe, distributed by Capital EMI at the time.
Mm. EMI was a big label back in those days.
Yeah, so that's my first album of choice.
Very nice choice. I think that's definitely one of their really overlooked records or one of their overlooked albums, but
Yeah.
I have no doubt in my mind that it's one of their best. And
Yeah, especially the early period, because a lot of people go to Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, Wish You Were Here, Animals,
Yeah.
and that's about it. Which obviously, don't get me wrong, all great stuff, but
But yeah, it's like you gotta. I guess it's kind of like with those with giving credit to those to their earlier stuff, because if it weren't for these records like Metal and even Amagama or Atom Heart Mother, we wouldn't even have the records that we know and love, like The Dark Side of the Moon, The Wall, and Wish You Were Here.
right. And Atom Heart Mother, in some places, is even more out there than this album.
Yeah, that seems to be like Pink Floyd's trademark, is just having really wild sound effects and like really like long songs that like go in different directions.
Yeah, but it's great. And David Gilmour's guitar solos are like none other,
Hmm. I think that was definitely a band that really shined through the chemistry.
without a doubt. Even though later on there were some troubles, but even then,
Mm.
they created masterworks with some of their most divided times during the Wall sessions and the Final Cut session.
Yeah, yeah. I remember hearing about like the wall being made, and there was like increasing tensions between the band, like within the members themselves.
Yeah, because what happened with the Wall was that Roger Waters had two album ideas: The Wall and The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. He presented both options to the band, and we're like, which one do you guys want to do? I want to do one as a band. I want to do one as a solo project. The band chose The Wall, and then later on, Roger Waters would do The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. Due to the fact that Roger Waters literally took The Wall into his own thing and kind of was his baby, kind of, because it was kind of autobiographical. Pink is Roger Waters.
Mm.
He kind of was dictating everything and telling people what to do, kind of thing, and that kind of grew the tensions. And then that same irritated situation went further into the Final Cut era, because I mean the Final Cut is a continuation of The Wall, but of course that's even more disgruntlement had occurred during that time, and you could even tell with the David Gilmour's guitar playing and guitar solos, they are not like what you get on The Wall. Don't get me wrong, both great, but not the same.
Yeah. I guess it's always nice to like hear like the contrast between one record or the next,
Oh yeah.
which to go off for into the record that I want to show you guys. It's another album that has a 20-minute epic, and it's actually one of the most famous prog rock albums of all time, definitely of the 1970s, but definitely of all time. This was the band's first like sophomore effort as a prog rock band.
Okay.
That This one is 2112,
Oh yes.
which everyone knows it for the 20-minute song 2112,
Oh
which
yes.
if you want to have a look, here's the artwork, the lyrics, and the members. Just more just more headshots and stuff like that for
Mhm.
so this is so and here's the back, which has side 1 being all of 2112, and side 2 being like the passage to Bangkok, Twilight Zone, Lessons, Tears, and Something for Nothing.
Oh yeah.
But I guess why I picked this up is because this was definitely a super influential album to not just my music, but just to me getting into progressive rock. And I I could go on record saying that I've listened to this album numerous different times, especially 2112, which I think is hands down one of their most extraordinary experimentations with their music, because that was the first instance where we heard them experiment with keyboards, and we also heard we also heard the chemistry between the band members, similar to like it's like it took the chemistry from Fly By Night and it expanded on it. And I think that's how you really know a band is a band. And I think this album in particular is a great representation of that, because when I hear the interludes, both the interludes into like one song or one part of 2112 into the next, like I can feel the band truly connecting and clicking with each other. And I brought this up in my first like topic video for Minds Behind the Music because I talked about Rush. I think that they are a band in which the chemistry was just undoubtedly there, and from beginning to end of their career as Rush.
Mhm.
And I think I talked with my drummer about this, but I think personally I don't think there's a bad song on this album at all. Like there might be songs that I don't enjoy, but I think they all have their own charms. Like 2112, listening to it the whole way through, I will admit it can be a task, but I'd say if you got a drive that is like over an hour to like maybe like 45 minutes to an hour, I would definitely check this album out because the they got 2112 there. It's in 7 parts. The first part is the overture, which is the instrumental introduction. The second part is the Temples of Syrinx, which is where it has like a short 2 minute um, little song for where the lead vocals come in. And then there's Discovery, which is basically like a little mellowed out guitar and vocal tune. It revolves around just the guitar. And then Presentation I think is just um, a real like beautiful ballad that plays in 2112 that leads to uh that leads to an awesome that leads to a guitar solo that's I think on a technical level has great tone, like really high, really good like mids and really high like perfect distortion where it's not like you hear in a heavy metal tune, but it's something that's something that's you would commonly hear in hard rock. And then there's part 5, which is the Oracle, the Dream, and it's like a more ballad and more emotional and a more emotional part to it. And then part 6 is Soliloquy, which is more of like the ballad discussing like the thoughts of life and the purpose of it, more or less like someone who feels like he's like not achieved much in his life, but and I think the music really carries on with that emotion. And then there's the grand finale, which is like a little instrumental part that I think really ties it together. It's like a huge coda. And
Yeah, without a doubt. That's and the whole concept alone is really cool. You didn't really see a whole lot of concept album kind of releases at this time in music history. This is I would say one of the earliest examples of
mhm.
a concept album. And the whole album as a whole isn't really necessarily a concept album, but definitely all of the first
Yeah, the
side.
first side being 2112, and I think um or were you gonna was there something else you wanted to say?
Yeah, the only other thing, like within all these interludes and all that stuff, you can't go wrong with. I mean, it's very proggy and very unique that they
Mm,
have something like changing guitar tuning and keeping that in a recording within the song.
yeah. Yeah, it's like it's odd sounding, but like to us it fits the song.
Yeah.
And a fun little fact about this record, which always surprised me, this is the album that saved Rush
Hmm.
because their previous album before that, Caress of Steel, was also kind of like a concept album. It was like a proggy concept album,
Hmm.
but it didn't do popular enough for Rush to really make it,
No.
and it actually almost ended their career. But when they came up with 2112, that's when that was when it's like, okay, these guys are actually pretty good. Let's see what else they can do. And
Right.
that's just how it is. And the other tunes, if I could, I'll just touch up on them real quick. Passage to Bangkok, the is it's like basically like a regular like kind of hard rock tune. It's not really proggy, but it's definitely like it's definitely an energetic, no nonsense hard rock tune. The
One of
Twilight,
Rush's best guitar bits.
yes,
Guitar
I
riffs.
agree. One of their best riffs, and I think one of like I I I think that production wise, the guitars and the guitar and the bass tone is some of the best on an album you'd hear in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
The Twilight Zone is like kind of like a ballad like song, but it's a little more proggy. Like it goes from like a little shuffle beat to like a ballad kind of beat. And the song is actually about 2 episodes or 2 or 3 episodes from the actual TV show The Twilight Zone. Like the lyrical content in the song The Twilight Zone is based on 2 or 3 episodes.
That I didn't know.
And lessons I think lessons is also another favorite of mine because I think the way that it first starts as an acoustic, like it's a little acoustic tune, and then the drums and the bass come in, and then it goes straight to an electric guitar, which I think is one of the best combinations of acoustic and electric in any song. And then there's Tears, which is I think one of their most beautiful songs that
Oh
I've
yeah.
ever heard. And it's like a ballad where it's kind of like really melancholic, and it kind of talks about like it just talks about sadness and like being like just shedding tears and all that other stuff. Nothing too nothing too lyrically complex, which is hard to say considering that Neil Peart was their lyricist and the songs that came from Rush with Neil Peart. It's it's very unique, but I think it's a beautiful ballad. And then they end it with Something for Nothing, which is like another straightforward hard rock tune like Passage to Bangkok. And I I love I love the energy in Something for Nothing because Geddy Lee first starts it starts with Geddy Lee and the guitar, like Alex Lifeson's guitar being very like mellowed out, like very quiet and somber, and then it just goes straight into like a overdrive guitar tone, and Geddy Lee's just going up there, like going ham on his vocals. Like you feel like the energy and the power, and that's what I love about that song.
Oh yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. And don't mind that little interruption I just had. Someone walked into my room and they didn't realize I was recording, so pardon that little interruption. I was paying attention.
No worries, man.
But um
So what's your next record?
my next record is the following. A lot of prog rock is considered to be more of the 70s, late 60s to 70s and 80s, like you said. But there are some
Mhm.
bands today who still not only use prog elements within their music, are prog rock, prog metal, and all that stuff. And a
Mm.
prime example of that in the modern day, even though this specific release was released in 1999, it's still their music still today, and they just released a live album about a month ago, but their most recent studio release from February of 2019 still shows it to this day. This prog rock, prog metal band I'm going to talk about is Dream Theater.
Mm. Scenes from Memory. Wow.
Yep, this is Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. So fun fact about the title of this song: in their debut album, and I'm putting air quotes over their debut album, Images and Words, they have a song called Metropolis Part 2, or Part 1, excuse me, Metropolis Part 2 is this. Metropolis Part 1 is on the Images and Words album. And they did that as a joke. They had no intentions of a part 2, but fans were going crazy. Where's part 2? Where's part 2? So they just slapped Metropolis Part 2 on here and maybe added some musical intricacies and some of the lyricism ever so vaguely connecting it to this. But pretty much this is still its own entity. But that's kind of where Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from Memory, came from. But really, the album is considered to be called Scenes from a Memory, as you had said earlier. Very interesting, because it's interesting how a lot of these are concept related, because this is another one of those. This album takes place in 1999 when this album was released. However, there's a character in this by the name of Nicholas. He's experiencing all these things in his dreams, and he's not knowing what's going on. So he goes to a hypnotherapist, and he gets transported back to 1928,
Hmm.
where he learns that he was a reincarnation of a girl named Victoria. That's all I'll say without ruining the entire plot of the album, but it's definitely a very interesting thing that they do. Very beautiful gatefold. Um, there is an involved murder within the storyline,
Oh
um,
wow.
and that's a newspaper with the original headline that said "Murder, Young Girl Killed," and which is actually mentioned within the lyrics of the song as well, one of them. And that's the original headline. But what do people know and don't know was what's in that initial news story that was reported all accurate, or was part of that a cover up? Dun dun. I guess you'll have to listen to the album to find out. But
Yeah.
I'll tell you, this album has some of the best ballads and prog rock moments of modern prog music. The song, where is it? Well, Dance of Eternity. Dance of Eternity is one of two fully instrumental tunes on this album, and Dance of Eternity is in a part of the storyline where pretty much a love triangle has kind of formed. And even though the band never officially made any statements, at least to my knowledge, about the meaning behind a song, the general consensus of the meaning of that song is that pretty much the two of the three characters are frolicking, engaging in coitus, um, which I guess kind of matches the high intensity of the song at times. And the way it ends, bum 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 bum, kind of like a, oh, I'm the man has trying to put this in nice terms for your podcast here. Kind of a,
He's
I guess,
finished.
yeah, I guess finished. Yeah, that's a, and he's like just doing his deep breaths, like or something. I don't know. I'm trying to put it cleanly here, but what's cool about Dance of Eternity is you're getting the prog rockness that you're expecting from a prog rock band. But then, as I said, some of this story goes back to 1928. Well, about 2 minutes 30 seconds into Dance of Eternity, you're going to this prog thing, and then a ragtime piano solo comes in.
Wow.
It's, you don't expect that from prog music. It's so cool, and in fact matches the
Yeah.
time period of what they're trying to bring out here. But yeah, very good. Some of the most beautiful songs on this album are "The Spirit Carries On" and "Through Her Eyes." As I said, and as you learned, there was a death, murder, really.
Mm.
Um, and the Nicholas character in "Through Her Eyes" is visiting her grave site and kind of reminiscing, because as I said, he's a reincarnation of Victoria in 1999. It's kind of wild. And then he's like, "What's going on? Like, why is all?" And still trying to understand everything that's going on in his dreams. And Spirit Carries On, and the final closing track, "Finally Free," he kind of is relieved and understands everything. And the Spirit Carries On. It kind of is very beautiful. And this album as a whole kind of redefines some of the ways I think about death, because not that I have ever really thought about it much, and I come from a Catholic background, so of course we have the belief of the afterlife and all that. Well, this album kind of helped confirm a lot of that. And there's a lyric in "The Spirit Carries On" where the murdered character comes back to Nicholas and says, "Move on, be brave. Don't weep at my grave because I'm no longer here. Please never let my memory disappear." And quite frankly, that's one of the most beautiful lyrics within music, I think, especially when dealing with the loss of someone, because that's not universal, or that's not just exclusive to this situation. That's kind of a universal message. And
Hmm.
it's just a very touching piece. And this is my favorite album of all time.
Yeah. I noticed that that's like everyone's favorite Dream Theater album. Like, um, I think that's probably my. I was talking to my drummer about that. He loves that album, and I like whenever I think of people like whenever I think of like praising Dream Theater, that seems to be like their magnum opus of.
It most certainly is. This is one of the main albums people talk about. The main albums people talk about when it comes to Dream Theater are Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory, which I just showed, their debut album in air quotes, um, with images and words, and then their 2004, 2005-ish era release, Octavarium.
Mm.
And they're they only had one radio hit called Pull Me Under, which is the opening track on Images and Words, which is what brings the popularity of Images and Words on top of its greatness, of course. And then the El Octavarium, even though it didn't have a radio hit, it had a very well known, at least in the metal and prog era scene, a song called Panic Attack,
Yeah,
which,
with the bass.
yep, doodle 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 doodle, yeah, exactly. And that song and this song after that, I can't remember the name of the song that came after that. Kind of, if you like the band Muse, Octavarium is a good place because they kind of, I would say that some of their sounds, I mean, obviously some of that era of music had a lot of the Muse and kind of vibe to it, some of it, especially in that genre. But
Yeah.
if you enjoy Muse, you definitely enjoy Dream Theater, especially the album Octavarium, because I think that they definitely, on a couple tracks, as I said, with Panic Attack and this song after, which I'm drawing a blank as to the title at the moment, they definitely bring it to that kind of sound, but still making it their own, still the Dream Theater progginess that you're used to, but just staying relevant, kind of like what every artist who's been around for a while like has done. I mean, it's completely left field compared to prog rock, but like look at Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
He started off, well, she lived in the southern states. I believe she's from Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Um,
I I think
and
she actually might be from up here, like I think in the tri-state area, like Pennsylvania.
maybe Pennsylvania. I'm not sure. She's
But
from, as I was saying, I was thinking she might be from Pennsylvania too, but she's either
yeah,
Pennsylvania or Nashville, one of these areas. But anyway,
yeah,
she started off her career as a country musician. Well, people were liking that, but people
mm,
wanted to see her do some more pop stuff. So she gave the best of both worlds with her album Red.
yeah,
Well, then she turned into a whole pop star doing her own thing. I mean, she still had her roots, but it was still different. So you have her album 1989 come out. You have Reputation, you have Lover all come out, which are
yeah,
mainly pop oriented, some of them more so than others. But with still a great same lyricism and everything that you get from a Taylor Swift album. And then in 2020 here, we got two albums come out by her, Folklore and Evermore, that are both indie rock. She said that she felt no limitations. Not that she had a whole heck of a lot of them back in the day, but she was always thinking about her tours and how this would sound on stage in a stadium. Well, she's kind of progressing with what she wants to do, what her fans in the industry is doing, and what she wants to do creatively at the same time. So that's kind of what Dream Theater was doing with Octavarium a little bit. And that's like one of the few times I see Dream Theater do that, because Dream Theater kind of does their own thing. But it's kind of like, I mean, a left field comparison, as I said, but it still holds up.
yeah. And I noticed that not just with Dream Theater, I noticed that with Linkin Park as well. Like
Hmm.
if you've seen like the I could name like 4 or 5 albums from Linkin Park, being Hybrid Theory, Meteora, Minutes to Midnight. That one album of theirs, I think that came out, Thousand Suns,
Yes.
and their last album with Chester Bennington. None of those albums sound similar to each other at all,
Nope.
and I think they've done the most experimentation out of any like rock band, or at least from their era, like their alternative rock, alternative metal scene. Like I've
Yeah.
never seen a band have such transition.
Yeah. No, without doubt.
And do you have anything else you would like to say about this Dream Theater album?
No, that's pretty much all I had to say about Dream Theater at the moment.
All right. I I heard that before I go on to the next album, I've heard that the Dance of Eternity has the most time signatures in a single song.
I've heard that time signature changes. Yeah, it is one of two of the most complex Dream Theater's songs to perform and play. It has definitely, I don't remember how many time signature changes, but I believe it was upwards of 70, if I'm not
Seven.
mistaken.
I thought I heard it was over 100 actually.
Maybe, I don't know. It's been a while since I've done that research on that, but it's at
I don't
least
know either.
70. And then the only other song that is just as complicated as Dance of Eternity would be the song A Nightmare to Remember from their Black Clouds and Silver Linings album, which came out in '09.
Oh nine.
10 years later, actually, compared to Scenes from Memory.
Oh
But yeah, those are the two most complex pieces of Dream Theater material.
yeah, that was the last Portnoy album, right?
It was.
Uh, yeah, I remember that being like a big change in Dream Theater. But
It definitely was.
speaking of bands with big changes, there's actually two albums that I want to present. I'll present you this one first because this was before that big change. This is a Foxtrot by Genesis. This is my I would say my second favorite Genesis album. Definitely my second. Oh, we got it right here. Maybe we could both talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh, you got the gatefold. I don't have the gatefold. I got an 80s repressing.
Yeah, this is a this is an early pressing. I don't think this is an original, but
Yeah, I think this might be one from the 80s because most of the 80s albums have don't have gatefolds unless they're like really popular like Thriller or
right.
but yes, we could both talk about it. This is from the Gabriel era, and I think songwriting wise, it's one of their best to date. I think both in lyrical topics and just in technicality. Because, for example, "Watcher of the Skies," the opening track from this album, is in it's in a 6/4 time signature,
Yes.
and I've I might there might be a little transitiony parts another time, but it's mostly in 6/4, and I think what really makes Odd Time shine more is when you hear it and it doesn't sound like Odd Time, and I
Yeah.
think that's one of those instances. Like I got mine.
Yeah. What does your label have? You have the pink label?
Yeah, I got the Charisma.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
got the original. I got the earlier blue Charisma label.
yeah, I got the recent pink Charisma label, and the first side the first side has Watcher of the Skies, Timetable, Get 'em Out by Friday, and Can Utility of and the Coastliners. Timetable, I think, is also a beautiful song. I
Oh
think
yeah.
there's the piano part. I love the piano intro. Tony Banks. I think what the thing that shines about Tony Banks as a keyboard player is his compositions. Like I think hands down his compositions definitely shine.
Yeah.
And when you were a keyboard player for progressive rock in the 70s, you were practically viewed as a god. And
Yeah. I mean, look at Styx.
like
I don't know if you pulled any Styx albums out, but I didn't. And Styx is a great example of that.
yeah, especially their earlier works.
Yeah.
And yeah, this the artwork and I got the stuff in the back. Yeah.
Oh yeah. This album, I'll tell you, has one of the best closing tracks of an album period with Supper's Ready.
Yeah.
And and that again, in a song that pretty much fills up an entire side. The only exception to that is what was the name of the song? Horizon, I believe, was the song that the instrumental Steve Hackett guitar piece that came out before that.
Yes,
Yeah.
Horizons cuz the whole B-side was Horizons and Supper's Ready
Yeah.
and I think Supper's Ready I believe it or not, originally I wasn't a big fan of Supper's Ready, but when I first really started listening to it and analyzing each individual part from that song, I grew to love that song.
I'll tell you, it's when I think of flawless and perfect closing tracks for an album, Supper's Ready by Fox from Foxtrot is one of them. Another
Mm-hmm.
one would be, even though this is by no means my favorite album by this band, the Rolling Stones' Let It Bleed with You Can't Always Get What You Want is a fantastic closing track.
Oh, I forgot that was the closing track from
Um,
Let It Bleed.
but I mean, that's one of my least favorite Rolling Stones albums. Crucify Me Now, I know. But
I only know like two or three songs from that album. I'm not surprisingly I have not listened to many of the Rolling Stones albums.
yeah, I must say, I think that my favorite my favorite Rolling Stones album is their Satanic Majesty's Request, which is their psych rock album, which I
Mm.
but yeah, everybody battles between Sticky Fingers and Let It Bleed, and I'm hardcore for Sticky Fingers over here.
Yeah, I like Sticky Fingers. I love Wild Horses is probably one of my favorite songs from like by the Rolling Stones.
Oh, without a doubt. Now, what was the other Genesis album you were going to pull out? Because I almost pulled out a second Genesis album myself, but I'm curious of which one you did. I didn't pull any other Genesis, but
Um, I since most of this is like my entire prog rock collection, I'm like really deficient in prog rock albums at the moment.
it's
It's
okay.
this Genesis album, A Trick of the Tail.
Okay.
This was actually the first Genesis album in which Phil Collins sings lead vocals on.
Yep.
It came out in 1976. I believe this is the gatefold right here. It
Hmm.
has all the lyrics and the songs, and I would, I could honestly say like, I a lot of instances in which the band would have to change the vocalist. It's hit or miss.
Yeah.
I think in this case it's a massive hit, and I could not. I was like blown away by that because when you look at Peter Gabriel when he was in Genesis, we're like, this dude is the vocalist of Genesis. Like you cannot think of anyone else as the vocalist of Genesis besides him. Like if you ever seen the Shepperton Studios concert, that that I think is the my favorite live performance of Genesis, which that was in 1973. I would say 1973 because that was shortly after Selling England by the Pound came out, so they were promoting that album. But
Yeah. A lot of bands have changed their vocalists, and many times it's been in their favor, as you said, and many times it has not. But Genesis, I think both Phil Collins and Peter Gabriel both did fantastic jobs as vocalists. Similar
yeah,
to Van Halen, both Hagar and David Lee Roth, Sammy Hagar. Like,
yeah, and they're both great in their own right.
yeah.
And I could even I would love to go back to this album, but a lot of the songs I could tell you a lot of the songs that I love both on like a technical level and both on just melodic and just on a songwriting level. Dance on a Volcano, that's side 1 is Dance on a Volcano, Entangled Squonk, and Madman Moon, which are all I think all of them are really great tunes. Robbery, Assault, and Battery. That one's okay. It's not one of my favorites from the album, but it's not a bad one.
Mhm.
Ripples. Ripples is, I think, one of their best songwriting wise. And just the instrumentation on that is just genius. I think very, very unique forms of instrumentation. There wasn't a lot of bass on this album. I mean, there was bass, but that instrument in particular didn't shine much except for the main title track, which is A Trick of the Tail,
Mhm.
which starts with the piano and starts with Mike Rutherford hitting high notes on the bass, which I really like that riff. Trick
I
of the
must,
Tail is another what?
no, go ahead, and I'll say what I have to say after.
Okay, A Trick of the Tail is definitely I I think it's also like I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites, but it's still a good song. Los Endos is also really good, but I think out of all of them that are my favorites, disclaimer, none of these songs are bad.
Right. No.
None of them are bad. I think they're this I could say this album is probably my favorite Genesis album in which Collins sings lead vocals on. Either which that and because I have two favorites that Collins sings lead vocals on. It's this one and it's Duke. But
Oh, yeah.
definitely
My my favorite Collins era. It's the more mainstream stuff, but Invisible Touch. I'm a sucker for that album.
Invisible Touch has some great tunes. I'll give it that.
Yeah.
Invisible Touch, they got what do they got? They got
I mean, the entire A side is all popular. Land of Confusion,
yeah, Land of Confusion.
Night to Night to Night, the title track, Invisible Touch, and there was another one I'm drawing blank to at the moment. But yeah. And you were speaking about bass a little bit, how it's not very predominant in that album. I'd venture to say that most albums from the 70s didn't have predominant bass because a lot of you look at Kiss,
Mm-hmm.
you unless you get to 2014 remasters, at least vinyl speaking, the bass is not very predominant. Like Love Gun is a perfect example of that. That's one of the few albums that I have both an old original pressing and a modern pressing of, and I love both versions. But you barely hear the bass, and that album came out in, I want to say, 76, 77 ish. Um,
Yeah, I'm not too familiar with Kiss's discography besides Destroyer and Dynasty and the
mhm,
solo albums that each member released in the late 70s.
yeah, but that's only one example. I mean, you look at Deep Purple is another band. Like you look at Machine Head, the
Mm,
bass isn't predominant. The keys dash organ that John Lord was playing and the guitars are the most predominant. Like so,
yeah. I think I think Burn was kind of a little shifty with that because they had Glenn Hughes on the bass and sing lead vocals along with David Coverdale.
I was gonna say if there's an exception, at least in regards to Deep Purple with bass in the early days, that would be the exception.
Yeah, definitely the albums with Glenn Hughes. That was where the bass was a lot more predominant or a lot.
Yeah, it wasn't
Or,
until like the '80s that bass really started being more predominant in music.
yeah, and I I think that Genesis on like you could tell that the bass was there and it was very like you could like I know that Mike Rutherford doesn't get a lot of like praise for his playing,
Yeah,
but when you uh analyze analyze each individual instrument that was playing in a lot of their earlier tunes, the bass lines were actually very sophisticated, like especially on their earlier stuff like with Foxtrot, Selling England, The Lamb Lies Down. There were a lot of there were definitely a lot of complex parts, and even Nursery Crime I think had a lot of great bass lines on it.
Music Box. I know it's the most stereotypical song on the album, but prime example.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of it's exactly what I mean. Like there's a lot like it. I know he doesn't like. I know he himself doesn't get praise as a player, but when you really analyze what he's doing, it's actually pretty complex.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah. So what is uh so what is the next record you would want to talk about?
I'm gonna pull out this, and this is a thick one. This is a 3 LP set, one of the few of those I
Mm.
have. This is Welcome Back, My Friends, to the Show That Never Ends, ladies and gentlemen, the live release by Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Mm. I got an ELP record for you too, but
Awesome, but yeah, this is a thick boy. Great concert shot at the back here. What year was this? I can't remember offhand. 74. Yeah,
oh
so very
74.
yeah, this is
Oh,
really early. They
after
only have
brain salad surgery.
yep, exactly. The packaging of this is very cool. I'm not even sure if I'm going to be able to get this whole freaking thing into the camera frame, but I could uh, kind of attempt to get this here if things aren't falling out on me here. Let's see. You kind
Damn.
of see how it says ELP there. Where,
Yeah, wow.
yeah, it's very well done packaging. You know, they really took care of packaging and records back in the day. You don't get that nowadays, or as much nowadays with even modern releases. But yeah, kind of cool. My only complaint, at least in regards to the record set, is that this was one of those records that is pressed in a way that side 1 and 6 are on one side,
Mhm.
2 and 3 are on another, and that kind of thing. Because at the time in the '70s, those record changers were popular, where you stack a bunch of records, you get one side, and and it just keeps plopping the records down. So that's kind of what they were accommodating here. The Beach Boys' "Endless Summer" is the same way. "Live Bullet" by Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, and "Evening with John Denver," a whole bunch of those albums have it. Um,
Yeah.
it just makes it for people who want to listen to an album in its entirety. In today's day, change records every side, and I mean it is what it is. But it's still this is one of the best prog live albums to exist. Um,
I think my copy that I have of Marvin Gaye at the London Palladium is a lot like that too, because it has like a it's I think it might be a double LP album or a double LP live album.
I believe it's a double, yeah.
Yeah, and then while that's a triple LP, or that's a triple LP album because you have the 3 vinyl records.
Right.
But
But yeah, they literally have to put Tarkus, like the song Tarkus from their album Tarkus,
mm,
literally has to be on two sides because they have all of side two is Tarkus, and then half of side three is a continuation of Tarkus because of how long it is, or they're
yeah,
because of course they're on stage, they're improvising, doing all this fun stuff. But yeah, I think that the way they closed the show, I don't know if because it was just a well-known song and this is how they closed all their shows, because I haven't heard Works Volume 1 or 2 to
mm,
compare to this, but I'll tell you, Carnival 9, they do the first through third impressions, right? Impressions, yeah, as a closing.
oh really?
Fantastic way to end.
Oh, I agree. N-
Um,
No doubt. No doubt. One of the what a great way to end.
yeah, and of course we have other classics like Hoedown on this as well. This is just a very fantastic triple LP set, and this is one of my favorite Prog live albums.
Yeah, I think that Emerson, Lake and Palmer was definitely that band that was like a wonder to see live. Like
Yeah.
I feel like if you saw them, if we got to see them live in concert, it was definitely an extraordinary experience.
Yeah, without a doubt. And a lot of people were made fun of for liking prog rock in the 70s and all that. I mean, look at that 70s show. They'd make a whole skit about it with the Styx Grand Illusion album.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, people think that if Styx are nerdy, try listening to Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Mm-hmm. But is there anything else you want to mention about the album?
That's about all I got for that album.
All right.
I guess you
Well,
should do your ELP album next.
yeah. I was. The funny thing is, right after I was moving the Genesis album, the next thing that came up was the Emerson, Lake and Palmer record. So it could not have been more perfect.
Nice.
And the ELP record that I want to show you guys is Tarkus.
Oh, there you go.
It's this. I would say this hands down is my favorite Emerson, Lake and Palmer record. I even have the gatefold with all the artwork and everything because the weird thing is the artwork for at least in the modern, at least nowadays, has been like shamed and like people are saying like, oh, this is such weird artwork. Why would they do this? But I look through it and I think it's a very unique. I think it's very unique and
Oh yeah, I love it.
because I think with progressive rock bands, they have to really go all out and go wild with like the artwork, so it could be like nice and colorful, and to really get you engaged in the album and the theme, like the subject matters.
Yeah, without a doubt. I can't remember if my copy of Tarkus is the gatefold or not offhand, but I believe it is. Mine is definitely a lot more beaten compared to yours, though.
Yeah, I forgot when I got this album. I think I got it back in August,
Okay.
and let me see this is actually this has the Atlantic label, like similar to the Led Zeppelin and similar to any other albums I have by Atlantic that came out in the 70s.
So that's a reissue then, because I believe it was originally on the same label as my Welcome Back, My Friends, which was on the Manicore label.
Oh, Manicore. Yeah, this actually, yeah, it probably is a reissue. But the whole first side is Tarkus, and the whole second side is just like short little pieces, which I think are just as great. Like Jeremy Bender, I think that's a really great, catchy tune. Bitches Crystal is probably one of my favorite ELP songs.
And definitely a cool title. Like, you don't hear that kind of title nowadays.
Yeah, yeah, especially in rock music in the 70s. Like it seemed very obscene uh to have a song with like a curse word in it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's what are the other tunes it has? Infinite Space, the Only Way, that's a hymn that written by Keith Emerson and Greg Lake. Infinite Space, just a Time and Place, and Are You Ready, Eddie? Which I think, again, I think Emerson, Lake and Palmer's songwriting is probably some of the most unique because they they took advantage of what they had to work with, and they pushed it to its limits. And I
Oh,
think that's what really made them shine.
they really knew how to make it shine.
Like I always looked at like the three best and most influential prog rock keyboard players, at least from that era, would have to be, I would say, from the third to the first of most influential would be, I would be Tony Banks being the third, Rick Wakeman being the second, and Keith Emerson being the first.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I can see that.
Yeah.
I didn't pull any Yes albums either, but I assume you did.
Yep. I got something cooked for you guys.
Knowing you, I think I know which album it is too, but I'm gonna keep that for. I'll tell you guys if I'm right when you pull it.
Yep. So what is your next record?
Well, we have a very well-known prog rock band by the name of Jethro Tull coming up next on my choices here, but I'm not choosing a traditional choice for them. Everybody thinks Thick as a Brick, Aqualung, maybe even Songs from the Wood. But I'm choosing their album from 1979, which is easily my favorite Jethro Tull album, called Stormwatch.
I've heard about that album. I I haven't listened. I surprisingly haven't listened to much Jethro Tull. I've listened to Thick as a Brick, and I think I think it's a masterpiece.
Oh, it is. And it's just one song on two sides,
Yeah.
which is wild. But what's great about this album, rather than the fact that it's Jethro Tull and it's my favorite, so I guess I'm biased, but a lot of people hear about in the modern era, like from like say 2008 to now, at least in the United States, so I'm sure it's global, talking about climate change and all that. And music really wasn't talking too much about any of that stuff. Maybe here and there it's mentioned nowadays, but you really didn't hear much about it. You definitely didn't hear about climate change in the 80s. People weren't talking about that. Not much. It's not in the news all the time. You don't have
Yeah.
the government like trying to intervene or not intervene depending on the situation. But this album has this first examples of music talking about climate change. Um, and it has an excerpt on the, I don't know if you can see on the bottom of the album cover here, it has an excerpt from this title track Stormwatch. Actually, no, there's not a song on here called Stormwatch. I don't know what the hell I'm thinking. But pretty much a excerpt from one of the songs,
Yeah.
called
Maybe one of
Lines.
the opening ones.
Yeah, lines join in a faint discord at the Stormwatch brews, a concert of kings as the white sea snaps at the heels of a soft prayer whispered. And I mean, just that tongue tied, like kind of lyricism, I mean, that screams Prog too. But I would have to say North Sea Oil, Orion, not to be confused with the song from Master of Puppets by Metallica, Dark Ages, Flying Dutchman, and Eulogy are the best songs on this album, which is literally half of the album. I mean, the entire thing is great, but yeah, this and some of those songs are considered Tull hits, at least in the Tull community. This, unless you're a Tull fan, doesn't get a lot of attention. As I said earlier, you got Aqualung and Thick as a Brick and Song from the Wood. Maybe even Heavy Horses would get more attention than this. Minstrel in the Gallery, Passion Play. I could go on and on, but this is definitely, bless you. This is
Thank you.
definitely one to go on. And you know, I was talking about instrumental bits when talking about Dream Theater. The song Eulogy that closes this album, it's absolutely beautiful.
Hmm.
Instrumental piece that was dedicated, I forget what individual died, and I can't remember if it was a band member or a band member's family member passed away. And that song was written for them, which also adds to it. But that is just a fantastic instrumental piece. If you want a really good instrumental piece that could bring you to tears, that's it. If I was to say to check out any album out of this entire lot that I'm showing you today, this is probably the most underrated and the one I would say to check out the most. This is just a fantastic release in 2019. They released a 40th anniversary CD set for this album that I got, It has demos as well as live recordings from that era's tour. All great stuff, and that's a fantastic release. Some of those releases that were on that 40th anniversary CD box set was also released as a Record Store Day exclusive this past 2020 Record Store Day, this spring, summer, and fall at this point, because they did the 3 days because of the pandemic and all that. But during one of those, they had Stormwatch 2, which is some of those kind of like a best of those excerpts from the box set kind of thing, which I have, but I don't have here to show. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, you've definitely intrigued me to go and check that album out. I think that's I think I'll whenever I have time on my hands, I will definitely check that album out.
You got to tell me how you think. I would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, cuz I haven't listened to too much Jethro Tull. I believe my guitarist, he loves Jethro Tull, and I listened to Thick as a Brick, and I think that album's great. And a lot of their other songs, like The Teacher and a few of their other songs from like before that, are also really good. And I don't deny that they are a great band.
You just haven't delved deep, and I understand. There's so much music out there to dive into.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's if I was to say there's a most underrated Toe album of the ones that I know, because by no means do I know everything either. Of the ones I know, that's definitely the most underrated.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out when I get the chance.
All right, sounds good.
And just like before the next album that I'm before I get to the next album, do you have anything else you want to say about the record?
No, that's about it for that one.
All right. So the next just like before the next album, that this next album is actually the same album as this is actually going to be a Yes album.
Okay.
So just like before, when we brought up Emerson, Lake and Palmer, we also brought up Yes, and this album is Fragile.
That's the one I thought you were going to pull.
Yep, I actually got this recently. I think I got this last week, and
Yeah, I remember you sending me a message being like, look what I got.
yeah, you're usually the first guy I show whenever I get new vinyl.
That's
And
awesome. I love it.
if you guys want to see over here, this is the gatefold.
It was a roundabout.
Yep, and it has all the information. It says five yeah 5 tracks on this album are individual ideas personally arranged and organized by the 5 members of the bands. Cans and Brahms is an adaptation by Rick Wakeman on which he plays the electric piano and taking the part of the strings, grand piano, uh, taking part of the woodwind, and organ taking the brass. It's just different. It's very unique in regards to like just what they do and how they've gone to how they arrange their songs.
Yeah, yes. Even though Fragile is definitely one of the most stereotypical kind of releases, it's like
Mhm.
Zeppelin 4.
Yeah.
There's a reason why everybody loves it, no matter how many times they hear it. People could complain and moan all they want,
Hmm.
but at the end of the day, there's a reason it has the acclaim it has. It's
Yeah.
a great album.
I I think that I don't think there's a bad song on this album at all.
There
Like
isn't.
everyone knows Roundabout. I mean, most people that watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure know Roundabout. And there's Cans and Brahms. That's an arrangement taken from one of Brahms' specific arrangements.
Right.
The Fourth Symphony in E minor, third movement. That's another arrangement that Rick Wakeman did. We have Heaven. That's a great acoustic tune. South Side of the Sky
Yeah.
and 5% for Nothing. That was something that Bill Bruford wrote. Which fun fact, Bill Bruford, I think was in four, either 3 or 4 progressive rock bands that were big in the 70s. Because first he was in Yes, which you can see right here. He was in Yes, and he left the band after Close to the Edge to join King Crimson. And then in the mid to late 70s, he joined Genesis because he was going to become their touring drummer because Phil Collins was going to take place as the vocalist.
Mhm.
So they needed someone to play the drums during the tours that Phil Collins was going to sing in.
Right.
And there's a lot of great ones. The Long Distance Runaround, I love the riffs on that album. I love the riffs on this whole album, but I love the riffs on this song. The Fish, which is another, that was written by Chris Squire. Mood for a Day, that's a pretty good one too. That's I think we have Heaven and Mood for a Day. That's a nice little acoustic tune.
Right.
And my all-time favorite song from this record is the closing track, which is Heart of the Sunrise. That's the one that has that like bass and guitar riff that goes
Oh yeah.
like
Oh, you
uh,
can't go wrong. It's killer.
yeah, and it's the lyrics are the lyrics are just very very transcendent, very beautiful, and I think the arrangement is just fantastic. The arrangement on all of these songs off this record is just absolutely fantastic. The artwork is incredible as well, as you can see right here. You can
Hmm.
see for Yes, they got this one artist in the early to mid 70s. They had this one artist always work on their albums.
Roger Dean.
Roger Dean, yeah, that was I couldn't remember his name, but thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Roger Dean. Yeah, he worked on Yes. Did I can't remember if he worked on Close to the Edge.
I don't know if he did cool. I think he did do Close to the Edge. I think Close to the Edge, Relayer, Tales from Topographic Oceans. I think he did. Um, I don't know if he did Tormato. I don't know if he did that one.
Yeah, I don't think he did Going for the One either.
I don't think he did Going for the One either. Yeah, no. But Roger Dean is also, if you're not familiar with him with his he works with Yes, you might be familiar with his works with Asia because he did the album artwork for at least the debut album by Asia. I don't know if he did Alpha or I forget the name of the third album offhand, but
Yeah, the I think Asia and Yes were also like they also knew each other, similar to how Deep Purple and Black Sabbath knew each other, because some of the
yeah,
members of Asia also played in Yes, and one of the members of Deep Purple played in Black Sabbath. Um, Ian Gillan, the original vocalist of Deep Purple, the original and current vocalist of Deep Purple. Sorry about that.
no,
He's
you're
the
right.
he was the vocalist, or he sang on Black Sabbath's one record, Born Again, which has
Okay,
I think came out after the Mob Rules.
I haven't heard Born Again. That's one of them I haven't listened to yet.
Yeah, I haven't listened to a lot of post Ozzy, but I I I definitely would check it out. But if you guys want to know about the instrumentation for Fragile, it was John Anderson on vocals, Bill Bruford on drums, Steve Howe on electric and acoustic guitars, and vocals, like backing vocals,
Oh yeah,
Chris Squire on bass and backing vocals, Rick Wakeman on keyboards and all that. And I think, in my opinion, that was my favorite lineup of Yes. Like,
yeah,
don't get me wrong, Alan White was great. Alan White, I have nothing but respect for that drummer. He he I think he deserves a lot of the respect and credit that he got for Yes. Like Tales from Topographic Oceans, Going for the One, he did great on that. And he even performed he even nailed a lot of the songs that Bruford did to a T. If you ever
yeah.
heard if you ever seen their Rainbow Theater concert, I would
Hmm.
highly recommend you guys check that out. Like they go ham on that, but I think Fragile and Close to the Edge, I think they have the perfect Yes lineup.
Yes,
Like,
they no pun intended, but
yeah,
yes.
I'm about to
They
say.
really do. Even though my favorite Yes album is Drama, I can't argue. I mean, I love Close to the Edge and Fragile as well. Of course, I love all of Yes's
Mm.
works, but the lineup on Close to the Edge and Fragile is the best lineup, no matter how much I love Drama. The album, not actual drama. Um,
Yeah, but I think what we were talking about with bass not being prevalent, Yes is definitely not one of those bands. The bass and that is definitely a big part of their music.
Yeah, they're definitely one of those few exceptions because as a whole, the production of bass in the 70s just wasn't there.
Yeah, there was only a handful of bands that pulled off having the great production of the bass, and Yes was one of those. Rush was another one of those. Um, Black Sabbath, and but with Yes, there was a specific. The way that Chris Squire made his Rickenbacker sound was definitely a very unique one. Like the way it was it was very unique, and it reminded me of the way that Geddy Lee's playing reminds me a lot of Chris Squire's playing because they both played Rickenbackers in the 1970s, which that was a really popular bass guitar.
Right. Yeah.
And I think his performances on just any of the Yes albums that I've listened to are beyond exceptional. Like Close to the Edge, I love his playing on that. I love his playing on Fragile. Just on every single song that he plays on is just beyond exceptional.
Yeah,
And
without a doubt.
may he rest in peace. By the way, I think he died about 5 years ago.
So I can't remember what date, but yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, but he was. I had no doubt in my mind he's one of the greatest bass players in rock and progressive rock or just rock in general.
You have no doubt. Q's Gwen Stefani? No,
Uh, I wonder if she dabbled in progressive rock.
maybe. You never know.
Yeah, you never know.
I mean, artists like Lady Gaga are classically trained, so it's not an
Yeah,
impossibility.
yeah, it's not. It's yeah, it's not impossible.
Right. So you ready for my final album?
Yep.
My final album is by a band that we did mention very recently, and it is probably the most iconic of all the albums I've shown in the realm of prog rock. I don't know if you have one more to show after this, so I might be blown away by yours, and I could be very wrong. And this might not be the most iconic, but as of this moment, In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson.
That is pretty iconic.
Got to pick his nose, you know. No, I'm
Big
kidding.
nostrils.
Yeah, definitely one of the coolest gatefolds to exist, both on the inner and outer.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite photos of an inner gatefold, I must say. Has lyrics and information about the album. They were on Atlantic, at least in their early days. I don't know what happened later on, but their earlier work was on Atlantic. The most well-known piece on this entire album is 21st Century Schizophrenia Man. I don't know if I said that right, but anyway, it's a 7.5 minute piece and is probably one of the most well-known prog rock pieces of music that was not necessarily mainstream, because we have our bands like Rush and Genesis and all that, which were more mainstream compared to King Crimson, but of the non-mainstream prog rock, that's probably one of the most well-known. You have all sorts of interesting instrumentation on here. We talked about Emerson, Lake, and Palmer earlier. Well, Greg Lake started off in this band playing bass guitar and lead vocals. You got Robert Fripp playing the guitar, which some of the best guitar playing in a prog rock album of the late 60s, which this was. And prog rock, you wouldn't necessarily expect to hear woodwinds on an album of prog rock music, but you do on this album. And of course, you got the normal drums on here and vocals, as I said. And you don't only just have keyboards on here, but you have the Mellotron too, which the Mellotron, for those who don't know what the Mellotron sounds like, look at the song Strawberry Fields Forever by the Beatles, the opening. Bum, 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 bum. Like right before they go, let me take you there, cause I'm going down to Strawberry. That's what a Mellotron sounds like, or one of the ways a Mellotron could sound like, because they just had that was the earliest days of pre-recorded loops, because you would push a key on the Mellotron, which was kind of like a mini keyboard, just with a tape loop instead of strings that you're hammering. You push it, and it has like a little tape head. Each one of those notes had a little tape, and you push it until the tape loop ends, and then that's it. It's not like today on GarageBand or Logic Pro or Ableton where you could just repeat it over and over. You had to keep going at it, or however they did it. I don't know exactly how they got the loops to repeat exactly, rather than hitting the same note multiple times. But
Yeah.
they might have actually released the note and stopped and pushed it again right before it ends to try to keep the sound staying continuous. I don't know, but pretty much that's how the Mellotron was. And
And
go
you
ahead.
you know I think the one song off Fragile Roundabout, the one that everyone knows.
Hmm.
There's actually a mellotron in that too. And when
Yeah.
right before the keyboard solo, the in and around the lake, it's like a like you could like faintly hear it like right before the keyboard solo.
Oh yeah, you do.
Yeah.
But yeah, of early prog rock, because we kind of delve all the way through the late 70s here. Of early prog, this is the most iconic, I would have to say, or one of the most iconic, if not the most iconic. Everybody recognizes this imagery of this face, even if they don't know prog rock, even if they don't know music. That's just how
Yeah.
iconic this work is. Um, and just great stuff. If, as I said, I know Lewis, you have, or LA, you
Hmm.
have one more. We'll have to edit that out.
No,
You,
it's fine.
you have one more record to show, but I'd have to say this is the most iconic of the ones we're showing.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect set for your last vinyl albums, cuz that was definitely one of first the first prog rock records that really set the
That,
standard for the prog rock sound, at least from England, or from just
yeah,
the prog rock sound of what would be the early 70s music.
exactly.
I think no other band could have started this movement off like King Crimson did.
Yeah, without a doubt. And they had other albums that came out after this, like um, In the Wake of Poseidon, Lizard Islands, but they
Oh,
don't hold up compared to this. They're not bad, but they're a little bit more out there compared to In the Court of the
yeah.
Crimson King. I don't know what they did with albums like Red On. I hadn't heard
Or
those releases, even though Red is one of those is just about as up there in the King Crimson fandom as In the Court of the Crimson King. So I really should hear that album, but I just haven't yet. But
yeah,
yeah,
that I think that one actually has Bruford in it too.
it might.
It's
I'm not sure.
yeah, like Lark's Tongues and Aspic and Red. I believe they both have Bill Bruford in them.
Yeah, those are the other two iconic King Crimson albums that I have not heard, at least yet.
Yeah, Lark's Tongues and Aspic very it's very experimental, I think.
Well,
And
there's nothing wrong with that, especially with prog rock.
yeah, King Crimson was definitely like that band was like, how experimental can we get? And it was even prominent in the Court of the Kings and the Crimson King.
Hmm.
And I think I think that's what made them truly stand out as a band.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would want to say about the album?
No, that's all I got. I look forward to seeing what your final album is.
All right. Well, actually, I have two more albums, or two last few albums. I'll be very brief about them, but
Okay.
they're actually both American bands or American groups or musicians.
Okay.
The first one I will show you, which is actually an 80s repressing, which I would love to find the gatefold one with a gatefold, is Kansas' second album's Song for America.
I think mine is. I can't remember if my copy has a gatefold or not, honestly. So, but yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah, I think that Kansas is one of those progressive rock bands that really goes under the radar, at least because they're not really an English rock band, but that doesn't say that they aren't great, because I think on a technical level they're one of the best bands out there, for especially that plays the genre. And I have the back cover which has the members of the band from that era.
Yeah, Kansas is a whole lot more than Dust in the Wind and Carry Onward Wayward Son, just saying. I
Mm,
mean, both are great songs, both are great albums. Left Overture and Point of No Return, both fantastic. Some of my favorite albums in my collection,
mhm.
at least in prog rock, and I would venture a guess as a whole too. But yeah, there's so much more than that. But I must
I
say,
agree.
talking about when we first met, I mean, we both had to enter the recording class. We did a
Yeah,
in our class, we did a recording of Carry On Wayward Son. I played the keys and LA sang on that track. That was a good time.
yeah, that was a fun time. I think that that was definitely one of our first instances of like really breaking down a tune in like both production and performance.
Yeah.
And I think that Kansas was one of those bands that could really they really they really knew what they were doing when they were performing both like on in the studio and on stage live.
Yeah, and their stuff today is still just as good. I don't know their new album that just came out recently, but the album that came out in what 2016 or whatever, I forget the name of it. It had that giant bird on the cover.
Yeah. I
But I didn't mean to interrupt. I know you had
No,
more to
no, it's
that album.
fine if
So
you got to if oh, that's it's totally cool, dude.
no,
But
you're good. That's all I had to say at the moment.
there's actually a fun fact that I could tell you and the rest of the people. I believe I know I know this is probably like information that might be known for drummers, but my drummer's father or my drummer and his dad or my drummer's dad knows Phil Ehart from the band.
Oh yeah, I remember you telling me that a long time ago.
Yeah, and I think Phil Ehart is one. I think he's his drumming. Drummers in when drummers play progressive rock, like they have to really know what they're doing, and he's definitely no exception to that. He knows the drums like the back of his hand, and I think when it comes to Kansas, what people really think like, oh, are they a progressive rock? Are they really a progressive rock band? Do they have what it takes to be labeled that? I think so. I think that
Oh yeah,
they're they know how to handle odd time relatively well because I think one of the keys to handling odd time in a progressive rock band is making people not think is this odd time.
right.
It's I'll have you see this is just like another version of the cover when it has the songs and the
Yeah,
lyrics.
on the inner sleeve. Yeah,
Yeah, and for the vinyl record, I could show you guys.
it's on
Uh,
the Kirchner label, right?
yeah, it's Kirshner. This has the first song. Uh, this is the A side. The first song is Down the Road, then the title song, Song for America, which is probably my favorite Kansas tune.
One of mine too.
Yeah, and Lamplight Symphony. I think the whole A side is great. All of their songs, they're this is a band that really like I said, this is a band that's competent and knows what they're doing. And even the rhythm section is good. Like I hear the bass very well. I hear like the both guitarists and the keyboard player, like everything's in sync with each other and nothing is out of place.
And I'll tell you, I saw them perform a couple years ago. I want to say it was 2014 or something like that.
Mm,
They still got it. Half the members are not original members no more, but they know what they're doing. They got it. They still
yeah.
sound as great as they pretty much as they did back in the day. And as I said earlier, they're so much more than Carry On with Wayward Son and Dust in the Wind, or because that was more mainstream prog, so to speak. That's kind of like going into Fooling Yourself and Come Sail Away to like territory for Styx, because
Yeah.
you go into the earlier works of Kansas and Styx, and you see progginess like you wouldn't know. Like
Hmm.
if you just are a casual listener, you'll just listen to rock radio. Like you check out if you guys don't know, if you guys only know like the Grand Illusion, Paradise Theater, Kilroy Was Here by Styx, for example, check out Styx 2. It was originally released on Wooden Nickel Records. Very underrated album and fantastic record. um, cornerstone even. I mean, that had to hit Babe on it, but like
Mhm.
it's still underrated comparatively. And for Kansas, I mean, we got their debut, we got Songs for America, we got Monolith, just to name a
And
couple.
Mask.
Yeah, that too. Like check it, people many times with bands, they, and this is not just exclusive to prog rock, just as a whole, many people just pay attention to what's considered a classic period, and then they don't pay attention to anything else. And generally that goes at the expense of the artist or band's later works. But when it comes to prog rock acts, it kind of hits them both in the beginnings and in the ends, really, unless you're a dedicated fan.
Yeah.
You kind of really, the whole thing needs to be paid attention to, if I'm being honest. It just,
I
just one of those prime examples where there's, at least of the ones, because I haven't heard everything, but I've heard almost everything by Kansas. You can't go
yeah.
wrong. And another very underrated Kansas album, which kind of matches into the Point of No Return Left Overture era, but is not as mainstream. Audio Visions.
Oh, Audio Visions is good.
That's one of my favorite Kansas albums, and
I,
it still has the progginess that you want in a more mainstream sense, I guess.
mhm.
But it's still just as good. And you'll actually hear a hit or two on it. Well, at the same time, it's not like Monolith or Song for America, where you're not going to hear much of that. Rather than, I mean, Song for America, the title track was a hit, but
Yeah. And I think was it the what do you call it? The a lot of their stuff was really like the less proggier works, which it doesn't mean that one was better than the other. They like Kansas, I think they were a very competent, very clever band that like
yeah,
knew how to songwrite.
they most
And
certainly did.
I think with this album it makes no exception to that. And before I'll probably expand on this more when I after I show you this last album and I give you my final thoughts and we give the final thoughts and everything. The Rush is another example of that where you have to like I think in order to really be a fan of Rush, you have to like pay attention to everything they've done. Like you have to listen to almost everything they've done. I haven't listened to all of their albums all the way through, but I've
I'll,
listened to a decent amount.
I'll tell you, Rush's debut album is a Canadian version of Zeppelin 1.
Yeah.
I don't know if other people feel that way or if that's just something that's just my opinion. I don't know if other people will agree or disagree with me on that, but I'd say it's the equivalent of Zeppelin 1, and I'd actually go as far to say it's even better than Zeppelin 1. And Zeppelin is one of my top three favorite bands of all time.
I think that I definitely liked their first album, but it it wasn't I can't really say it was one of my favorites because it's a debut album, it's give and take,
Right.
but there were definitely some great tunes off of that. There was Need Some Love, there was Finding My Way, that's one of my favorites, Working Man,
Working
and
Man was a big hit off that one, of course.
yeah, and Finding My Way, that was another big hit because I think they continued to play that even after they got Neil and after they made it big.
Yeah. And
A lot
it's
of people,
interesting to see Giddy's vocal performance progress as he matures more as a musician, too.
yeah. And speaking of like progressing as a musician, uh, I'll probably explain. I'll expand on that through the final thoughts. But this next album I have is Frank Zappa, the Mothers. I think I showed this on your album.
You
On
showed that on our collaboration, too. Yeah. Overnight Sensation.
Yep, Overnight Sensation. They're one of the last few records. I think the second to last album that he made with the Mothers of Invention,
Mm-hmm.
which has I have the one with the gatefold where it has all the members and including Zappa down there,
Mm-hmm.
and I have it even has Tom Fowler on bass, Bruce Fowler on trombone, Ralph Humphrey on drums, Sal Marquez on trumpet and vocals, Ruth Underwood, Ian Underwood, George Duke on keyboards, which George Duke actually plays on one of my all-time favorite Zappa tunes, Inca Roads from One Size Fits All, the album that came out after this.
Yep.
and that's one of my favorite tunes. Jean-Luc Ponty, I probably butchered his name.
Yeah, he ended up doing a solo career also.
Yeah, believe it or not, Frank Zappa actually started a lot of famous people's careers,
Steve
like
Vai.
Steve Vai, Alice Cooper,
Yep.
um, Adrian Belew,
Yeah.
and
I actually have
and
one
Terry
size.
Bozzio.
Yeah. I actually have one size fits all on 8-track.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Kind of cool.
Yeah. I I think this is definitely one of my favorite Zappa albums from the 70s. I've gone on record saying that the 70s era of Zappa is my favorite of all time, like my favorite era of Zappa's music.
Mine too.
Yeah, and it's there's definitely a lot of on this album in particular, there are a lot of great songs. I could even go through I'll go through the set list or the track listing. They got Camarillo Brillo, I Am the Slime, Dirty Love, 50/50, Zombie Wolf, Dynamo Hum, and Montana. That Camarillo Brillo is one of my favorites. I think it's just a really catchy tune. I Am the Slime. That's it's like a great message along with like great playing. I think that very you could tell that all the musicians that played in Zappa's bands were very confident, very technically advanced, like very ahead of their time. I think this album as a whole was ahead of its time
Oh yeah.
cuz this album came out in
73, I believe. 76, 73 somewhere.
73 cuz One Size Fits All I think came out in 75 or 74. No,
Yeah, something like that.
I think Apostrophe came out in 74 and One Size Fits All came out in 75.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Not many people, and even myself, until you told me that you were going to pull, but possibly pull a Zappa album, I didn't think of Zappa as being progressive rock or anything like that. But he totally fits the bill because, he has all this crazy instrumentation that you wouldn't consider for
Mhm.
this stuff. I mean, you listen to some of the stuff he does. Probably the best example for crazy, wacky arrangements, and you could correct me if you think differently, or you could state your thoughts if you think differently. But I would have to say his album Joe's Garage probably has the most experimentation and interesting orchestrations to it.
I
Um,
actually agree with that.
yeah, in the Frank Zappa world, it's one of his most bashed albums for whatever reason. It's my personal
Mhm.
favorite.
It's
Uh,
my favorite too. I-
and I would have to say that it's fun. You just hear the mallets and vibraphones and all the stuff that you just don't get. Of course, you have the normal rock band kind of stuff, but like you have like, would you really imagine? I don't know how he gets this like duck quack kind of sound, but it's like he took like a rubber duck that had like one of those sound squeeze things, like a dog toy almost, and he
Yeah.
just squeezed it at full force, like kind of thing, like he does like in some of these songs. It's just really cool and creative. And to
Mhm.
think, he was anti-drugs. He only smoked cigarettes. He did all this wacky stuff sober.
Yeah, and he never he was very straight edge and notably straight edge cuz he's one of his rules for working with him or working with him musically like both as a band and just like working on his music, you could not like you could not smoke or drink like you could not like smoke cigarettes like smoke marijuana or do drugs or drink alcohol because like he felt that it would take away from the music. Like he felt that getting addicted to that stuff would take away from the music,
Mhm.
and for all we know, it probably could have because this Zappa's mind was a mind like no other, as you can see from the album cover here, which is I think one of my favorites and like one of the most unique album covers.
It's totally bizarre.
Yeah, I'll see if you guys could get it see it from here. It's like
Yeah.
so much like for an album that came out in 1973, like you would not expect like all of this to be on a singular album.
Yeah, no, all of Zappa's album covers, or at least most of them, I can't say it for all of them, but a good portion of them, especially in the early days, were very unique and very abstract like that one, and it's just very cool.
Yeah, I I and I the reason why I think this is very proggy is because of like the experimentation and the key changes and the time changes. Like I think
Oh,
Zo- I think Zombie Wolf, the intro of Zombie Wolf, has about three different time signature changes. Just the intro alone has three different time signature changes.
yeah, definitely. It's and those like brass section like runs bum, bum, ba-dum, bum, 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 bum. Like I think just with that alone there has to be some sort of, I don't know if, because I don't have the sheet music, so it's kind of hard to analyze it without actual sheet music and doing it by ear, at least for me personally. But that's either some intense triplets or it has to be time changes.
Yeah, I definitely think that it's definitely a lot of unique experimentation, like with just what you can do with instruments, how you can play instruments. Like Zappa was incredibly influential with that, with what not just what you can do with the instruments, what you can do in the studio with those instruments.
Yeah.
And
And Zappa is one of those people who I would have loved to either have a conversation with or at least see live in concert. I got to meet and see Dweezil Zappa, his son, but
yeah, which is awesome, which I would like to add.
yeah, but that it's not the same. Even though seeing him perform his dad's work was great.
Hmm. And I think that on a few of Zappa's albums, I don't know if it was on this one or on Apostrophe or both of those albums, but apparently Tina Turner and the Ikettes did backing vocals on some of these records.
I've heard that, but I don't know the details in regards to that. But I have heard that.
Yeah, I've never bothered to, which I probably should. I've never bothered to do much of the research on that, but um I've heard that, and if that is true, that's actually really cool because I would I know that Tina Turner has worked with a lot of rock bands back in the 60s and 70s,
Yeah,
but I would have never expected Tina Turner to work with the likes of Frank Zappa.
no, not at all.
Yeah. But that was my vinyl collection so
That was-
far with prog rock, or what I consider to be prog rock.
yeah, and this is just a handful of what I could show.
Yeah, definitely check out Mike's channel, RetroSpinVinyl. He has a ton of vinyl collections and a ton of vinyl to talk about. So once again, the link will be in the description for
Right.
both of his channels. But definitely check that out. And I think uh, what would be your takeaway from this, from all these, like, because I know we were talking about a lot of like the prog rock bands, and a lot of people know them for their famous tunes like Rush for Tom Sawyer, Kansas for Carry On Wayward Son, and Dust in the Wind. And
Now, if I was to say one thing in regards to prog rock music and bands as a whole, don't get me wrong. All of those things in regards to Tom Sawyer, um, Carry On Wayward Son, all that is great. Love it. But you're missing out because even though all that stuff is great, including Roundabout by yes too, since we showed some Kiss or Kansas, Kiss in Kansas. Yeah, yes is what I meant to say. Um, I would have to say, check out the older works, check out the newer works. Don't just focus on what's considered the classic period or most popular because you're missing out. You're not seeing the whole picture as to what these musicians can do. Prime example, because we were just talking about Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa's music, if you're not familiar with it, you start checking it out, you'll understand why he didn't get mainstream radio popularity. However, he had one or two popular songs that did make it to the radio. One of them that he did with his um, daughter Moon Zappa in the 80s, and in the 70s he had the song piece.
oh, one second.
if you Zappa, you might think Frank Zappa is the most bland musician out there. I mean, compared to what he could do. He had don't get me wrong, you get to see some of the Zappa stuff out there. You get to see some of the quirkiness and wackiness of Zappa that there was, but you don't see the full picture. You get albums like Joe's Garage and Chic Your Booty, both came out in 1979. Prime examples of what Zappa,
and
where
Zero
he,
Doors from 1976.
yeah, I would have to say these are his peak times. Yeah, sure. Moving Pictures and Signals is probably Rush's peak.
Yeah.
Until you get like maybe the only exceptions to that would be like Roll the Bones and then Clockwork Angels. But like you're checking out the bands at the best.
Definitely
that, but like you know what I mean?
My personal opinion on what I think is Rush's best work would probably be in between A Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres. Like, don't get me wrong, like Signals and Moving Pictures are great all on their own. They're definitely some of Rush's best work and most popular work for a reason.
Right.
But if you really want to listen to like Rush at like their peak performance and like their ultimate limit when it comes to playing, definitely check out A Farewell to Kings, which is my personal favorite Rush album, and Hemispheres.
Yeah. So pretty much, I guess what I'm saying at the end of the day, in a very long and rambling way, is widen the horizons. Don't, if you're just starting out with a band or artist, and this isn't just exclusive to prog rock, but it's just most certainly definitely very predominant with prog rock. Check out the most mainstream stuff first. You're just starting out, you want to get your feet wet. That's what you got to do. Understandably so. That's the mainstream stuff is just as good as the other stuff, but dive deeper. Because you'll, as I said, you're going to be missing out if you don't check out the other stuff. We showed prime examples of that here today. We showed both mainstream and non-mainstream albums by these bands, and we love and appreciate it all. And at least I do, and I'm sure to LA I could say the same thing for you.
Yeah, honestly, I could not have said that any better myself. Like, I definitely think that there's a lot that can be explored, not just with progressive rock, but with genres in general. When you really take time to listen to them, even if it's genres you don't like, there could be something that you'll appreciate with it, and you can see why the music was the way that it was.
Yeah.
And you might learn something from that, and that's that's what you got to be as a musician. You got to be open to learning new things.
Yeah, and just to give you guys an example, this isn't prog rock in any way, shape, or form, but one of the artists that in late 2020 that I've started really discovering and going a little bit deeper into would be Joni Mitchell. Everybody told me stay away from the album Mingus by Joni Mitchell, which Charles Mingus was a jazz musician, and this was his final project. He worked with Joni Mitchell on her at that point newest album. It would be the final project that Charles Mingus listened to. He died in the process of that album in the works. Thankfully, heard most of it, but because it's Joni Mitchell she's taking arrangements that this jazz connoisseur was making, and then making her material and lyrics and melody lines on top of it. It's nothing like anything else Joni Mitchell had ever done. Even though she was getting some jazz influences there, and it wasn't kind of like her Ladies of the Canyon era where it was just singer-songwriter. Even though she did keep that throughout her entire career, she it's just different compared to everything else. And of course, there are I compare it to Let It Be by the Beatles. I released the original Phil Spector 1970 version. How you have that banter in between the songs, sometimes between the band members. Well, they kind of did the same thing with Mingus by Joni Mitchell, and everybody says you're going to hate that album. Even as a jazz musician lover and jazz lover, you're not going to like it. I loved it instantly. So just because
I know I love it.
So just because other people think it's weird or it's not what you're traditionally go to, because for Joni Mitchell, most people go to the album Blue or Ladies of the Canyon. They don't pay attention to anything else usually. Maybe Hajira, but go into the deeper works. easily, Mingus is one of my favorite Joni Mitchell albums.
I completely agree with you, and I think one way to get the bass players or the bass listeners that love bass players to listen to that album, Jaco Pastorius plays on that album, and
Oh,
that's
yeah, exactly.
and he's basically I could hands down I could say he's the true Jimi Hendrix of bass.
He most certainly is, and that's not even the only album Jocko plays on for Joni Mitchell either.
Yeah, I remember he's played on a few others.
But that's just a prime example. I know it's not Prog, but it's universal throughout.
Yeah, I completely agree. But
But that's what I would say. That's my final thoughts and most important thing to say in regards to that. Enjoy all the music. Don't just limit yourself.
hey man, I could like I said I could not have said that any better myself. And
Absolutely.
with
So
that,
much, so much for this being a half hour, LA.
yeah, I mean I'm cool with it. I'm cool with whatever. This is still just for the channel and all that. But
Oh yeah, no, I'm loving it. I think it's great.
yep, but that's how I want to end it, guys. Thank you, Mike, again for coming out and uh, being interviewed for this and showing off some of your vinyls. It was definitely it was definitely a great time to hear. It's definitely a great time to hear what you had to say about your records.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was a lot of fun, as I said, and I'm greatly appreciative of the offer to have me even on.
Yeah, and definitely, and I'd love to have you on again.
Yeah,
Once,
as you already know, the people in the audience don't know, but you and me have known each other a while at this point. You know my
yeah,
music ain't limited to just prog.
yeah, I know. Neither my music ain't limited to that either. But
So
once again, check out his channel. It's Mike Guitar Player 07. He does performances and covers and his music. And check out his other channel for vinyl, RetroSpinVinyl. I will again link both of them in the description, and follow him on Instagram as well. It'd be Mike Guitar Player 07 and then
retrospin vinyl.
and RetroSpinVinyl. That both he has both Instagrams for both channels, so definitely check them out. Give him a follow, and follow me on Instagram. La Perez Works, just La Perez, but La Perez Works. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Is there anything else you want to say?
No, I think we pretty much nailed it. Thank you for the shout out, of course, and thank you in advance to anybody who chooses to follow me and join me on my musical journey.
Yep. But once again, thank you for coming out, and guys, thank you again for checking this stuff out. Like, comment, and subscribe for more. You'll eventually see me doing some live shows up on StreamYard, and I will keep you guys updated on when I will create the audio versions of the podcast. I'm just currently working some stuff out with my band because we're working on releasing a single in the near future, and keep on the lookout for that too. It's called Everyone Wants to Be a Hero, and
Nice.
so that will be coming out in the next few weeks. But after that, definitely expect some audio versions of this podcast. Uh, Once again, guys, I appreciate you all for coming and watching and coming and see Mike and I talking. But that's all I have to say. Have a good one, and always stay tuned.
Rock on, guys.